don't have a very long pinky.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's a
It's a hassle. It's a freaking big problem.
So-
Yeah, you see, I'm not the only one. It's a big problem. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of TwoSet Talks. And today we have a very special guest. His name is Augustin Hadelich. If you don't know him, he's an extraordinarily talented, incredible violinist. He's a world-class soloist, travels around the world. So if you ever go to a city, go check him out. Augustin, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to see you. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, nice. So, I mean, I don't even know. What should we even talk about today?
Well, I mean, since it is a musical TwoSet Talks podcast, why don't we begin with what did you have for breakfast? No, just kidding. I mean, what have you been up to? Can you tell us a little bit? Are you in the midst of touring right now?
Yeah, it's been a pretty intense summer. Actually, in July, I spent July in the United States, like going to a lot of different festivals, like Aspen, Tanglewood, played at the Hollywood Bowl, Ravinia, like all these festivals, Vail, Colorado. Now I'm at the Colorado Music Festival, and then in August I'll be in Australia and New Zealand. So it's sort of nonstop travel in the summer. But the nice thing about the summer is that the concerts tend to be in like really beautiful places often.
Okay.
Like out in, like Aspen, or like, you're out in the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains, or places like that. And so it's really beautiful to spend time there and make music there. Although sometimes it's hard to actually get there. So the travel tends to be a little bit more difficult, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is true. I think that's something we noticed for the first time when we don't tour anywhere near as much as you do, but when we went on our 2 world tours, we realized just how much difference it makes depending what season you go to the city, right?
Yeah, it's so different.
Like you go to Norway in winter, it's just miserable.
Yeah, I've learned this the hard way. Like, I was always going to like Minnesota in January and to Hong Kong in July, right? Like it's like I was like, I'm doing this wrong.
wrong dates. Yeah, it's so true.
But what's your like schedule like when you tour? Is it kind of really back to back, or do you have time to kind of do some fun things, do some sightseeing, anything like that?
Yeah, I try to, but some of it, especially this summer, has been quite back to back, and sometimes it's not the same pieces either. So that raises the amount of pressure and stress. Like when at one festival I was playing Prokofiev's second, and then Shostakovich #1 and Mendelssohn, but then also Hillary canceled the concert in Vail that then I also did with Beethoven. So it was like so many concertos, and so at that point I'm just I'm trying to focus and relax and practice and enjoy the concerts, and don't have time to also like hike up the mountain, But in the past, when I've been to Aspen, yes, I went for longer walks, and normally it's a nice thing. Although maybe not right before the concert, because sometimes, I don't know, you can get like, I don't know if it's heat stroke or if it's just like the exhaustion of hiking a lot. It's not maybe good right before you perform. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I was just like the repertoire stuff. Like, actually, I really want to ask you, like, right now, because for those people listening, for context, soloists kind of travel and they have a bunch of repertoire up their sleeves, and when they perform all that stuff, for something like Mendelssohn or like Beethoven or anything, like how many concertos can you play right now? Do you know? And also, how much time do you need on a notice to play a concerto? Like, hey, Augustin, can you play the Beethoven concerto tomorrow? Like, what is it like?
Well, I've sometimes, especially when I was starting out, sometimes your big breaks come as like short notice cancellations. And then it's a tricky thing to know, can you do it or not? It's actually way better not to do it than to do it and, not be ready for it. Like if you can handle it, then it's great to do. And then you have it can be particularly successful because everyone's already so grateful that you're there to save the day, to do the replacement, and people are like, yay, we have someone who can step in. But it's also important when to say, I don't think I can handle this. So there were some times, like there was one time I was asked to play the Bear Concerto on like a very short notice, and at the time I had not I hadn't looked at it in a long time, and I felt like, oh no, this is gonna be, I'm gonna be out of my depth. Then it's better to say no. Sorry, I can't.
That's
right, yeah. I mean, right now, I probably the stuff I did this summer is pretty close to being in my fingers, but it's always a question of kind of getting really back into the piece. So it's a little bit like method acting, that I think by thinking only about one piece for a while, then I get really into it, and then I play it better than if I'm just. Otherwise, it's a little bit the performance feels like it's a little bit sort of distracted, almost like I'm thinking about Mendelssohn while I'm performing Shostakovich, that sort of thing. Yeah. So you kind of have to like get really deep into one thing. I think it's also important. But these are mostly pieces that I've played for so long. Some of them I learned when I was growing up, like a long time ago. I memorized when I was like, maybe 12 or 14 or 16 or something. And so then getting them ready again is in some ways much faster. Because they'll be pretty, I don't have to like rememorize them from scratch. They're kind of still there. It's more of a question of, maybe sometimes that the old habits, like the stuff that, like the fingerings I did when I was 10. I don't want to be doing those in Mendelssohn because they're all bad. But but those are the ones that keep popping back up. Suddenly I find myself doing them. I was like, what? Where did that come from? I haven't done this finger in years. Suddenly it's back. Because I think the childhood memories are like really present. They're like very easy to access maybe in the brain. Whereas the fingering I figured out last year is saved in some other part of the brain and maybe gets forgotten again, right? So some of the work I do is that I've written down in my part sort of the changes that I make, and I sort of look at okay, I changed this and this and that. What are the recent things that I changed to try to not fall back into old habits, which is I think especially Mendelssohn, that's a piece where that happens to me sometimes because I just played it so much so early on, and it's a curse with that piece that often it gets played by young students, which isn't good for Mendelssohn or for the students, maybe sometimes.
That's really funny.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Like people can sometimes call Mendelssohn a student concerto, but it really isn't. It really is.
No, it's
so much more, right?
It's in the end, if you want to play it really well, it's actually, I think, one of the harder concertos. I find it's really difficult.
Like harder than like Sibelius, Tchaikovsky, Beethoven.
I mean, it's hard to in some ways. It's hard to compare. I mean, when you look at it technically, it shouldn't be, right? But in some way it is, because in Mendelssohn you hear every note when it's not quite right. It's very transparent actually as a piece. Whereas in Tchaikovsky, there's a million notes. Like, do people really like examine it under microscope, like if every single one of them was, like there's a lot going on basically, and a lot that maybe also doesn't get noticed. Whereas in Mendelssohn, I feel like everything has to be totally pristine and perfect, and and then maybe also then there's a psychological component too, when your own expectation for this piece is so high, like it's like, and that's part of it too. I think if I actually learned it now as a new piece, maybe in some ways it would be simpler to play, because there wouldn't be so much, so many memories, so much baggage in a way, right? And baggage, maybe baggage from recordings to other performances. What does everyone else do? With a piece like that, everyone plays it. It's all these things don't make it easier, actually.
Yeah.
That's why I played Mendelssohn.
Because I just didn't have any baggage.
I just learned it. I don't have any baggage in the past. And now, if it's one of the hardest concertos, I'm done. I've graduated from Berlin.
But what do you mean by what does baggage mean to you? Like, is it like when you're playing, you're like, I remember when I was 12, my teacher yelled at me for my octaves being out of tune. Like, what does it mean?
I don't know if it's that specific, but it's more that, I mean, these are not like bad memories. It's more that sometimes it could even be, when I was young, I managed to play this passage really well, but now it feels harder suddenly, or it feels different, or maybe you can suddenly lose your. There's a sort of like natural intuitive connection to the music, maybe that you have when you first learn it, and if you play it too much, then you kind of lose that a little bit. You start to overthink it. It's like, it doesn't feel natural anymore. Like, how do you find that again? Like that can be part of that too, that sometimes you have to sort of like rediscover what you liked about the piece in the first place, kind of like revisit it as though it's a fresh piece, maybe. So there's a lot of ways in which just playing something for a very, very long, over many, many, many years like this doesn't only make it easier, it can also make it a little bit harder. But that can happen. I mean, it can happen to other pieces too, but I find something like Prokofiev Second, I learned much later, and somehow I feel like it's pretty. I have a great time playing it, and it's, even though objectively, I guess in some ways it's more difficult, maybe, but it feels the process feels easier somehow to prepare it and perform it. I don't know.
No, that makes sense.
It's funny,
I'm curious then, because you mentioned about like kind of rediscovering pieces after playing so many times. Which piece have you performed the most this year so far?
I'm not really sure.
He's played so much.
Or is there like a piece that you just like been playing on repeat?
Well, I don't think I've been playing something like I try to have enough variation actually between pieces that I don't get sick of it. So that I find that even the great pieces of music, after a while, if I play the same thing over and over, there's an excitement and inspiration, right? And switching repertoire. So I try to have some variety. I did play a lot of Dvorak Concerto, a lot this past season, and I love the piece. Actually, I love it more. I've loved it more over the years. I think it's awesome and kind of underappreciated, and it's an awesome piece. But I'm now taking actually a break from it. I'm not playing it this coming season because I played it so much, and then I think it'll be good for me. Now I don't play Dvorak for a while. When I play it again, then it'll feel fresh and different again. That's with some pieces I do that, but.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, someone goes, "Hey, can you play Dvorak Concerto tomorrow? Can you do it?"
Okay, I mean, if you hold a gun to my head, probably. It's like I mean, if you say like right now, I don't know. I wouldn't want to, because like I would say there are things. It's a piece of like really hard places, like already the beginning, like and the ending of the piece, like those are super super difficult, and so most of it lies well, but suddenly there are things in there that's, sometimes it's dangerous when a composer actually knows the violin really well, and then they know everything that's possible in theory, and then they go a little too far maybe. So there's some stuff is really hard.
Actually,
so I would always want to look at it. So I don't know. Tomorrow. Maybe in a few days would be okay. I don't know about tomorrow. It would have to depend. But I've been in those situations where it's like okay, the day after tomorrow, we need. Well, there was one time it was Sibelius, so one time it was like Prokofiev 2 actually. My debut at the Hollywood Bowl was with Prokofiev 2 way back when, and it's like, okay, in 2 days, and then I'm like, oh God, how does the piece start? And I'm like playing, and like and then play it through, and then I sort of think like, okay, I think I can do it. Or, but as I said, there were a couple of times when I said I think it's better if I don't. It doesn't feel like I'll be ready, and you don't. It's more important, not like for your career. It's more important that you don't. That you don't do something that you're not ready for. Let me say it's better to say no than to play a performance that you're really weren't prepared for, right? And it's hard when you have so little time. There is not that much like that you can change fundamentally, right? You're probably gonna play it more or less how you played it last time and just try to get it in your fingers, but you're not gonna like rethink all your fingerings and stuff, right? Like there's no time for that. So when it was I think that time when I got asked to play Bear Concerto, now I play it sometimes, and it's different because I've spent more time on the piece. But back then, I felt like it's not only had I not done it in a long time, but I also felt like I don't think my Bear Concerto right now is ready to like. I'm not happy with it right now. I need to spend more time on it. So you kind of the temptation is there to say yes, you know, because of course, if you say no, all you're gonna think about is like, oh, I could be on this concert stage right now playing.
Yeah,
it's like the fear of missing out is like such it's such a big thing.
So true
for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people often think about how like you should say yes to all these opportunities, right? It's kind of like a very inspirational type of advice. Like, what's there to lose? Say yes, but there's always like a flip side. I think it's good advice to know when to say no to something, right?
100%, for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a bit different like analogy. I definitely think one is like kind of the consequence of if you say yes and then you don't perform well, what might that imply? But there's also like sometimes if you say yes to too many opportunities as well, you just find you're so busy you can't focus on the few things that are really important, right? Like let's say you have a way more important performance coming up that you really should be focusing your time practicing towards, but then you also go, oh, but let me try to learn Berg in 2 days next week, right? Then you only have that limited amount of time and resource.
Yeah, so your brain has a limit, right? So you want to sometimes it's better to do fewer things and do them really well than to try to do too much. You have to sort of
I agree.
You have to sort of know, okay, I want to do this other thing too, but maybe I'll do it next year. You know, like, well, I'll do it some other time. You kind of that is a better mindset, and then you eventually learn your limits. Like how much can you do at once? So some soloists have set very strict limits. They're like, okay, I gotta play 2 or 3 pieces only each year, and I tend to play more pieces than that. But it's kind of like you have to sort of figure out when do you feel happy and with your playing, and when do you thrive, like what's the limit. And if there's sometimes a sense if it's too much, then you stop having fun, you stop somehow the performances can suffer. So like you have to know when that is. And for some people they can play a lot of stuff, but you still have a limit, of course. Like there's you can't be in every place at once doing it. What's the movie? Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Or if you have a multiverse, then maybe you can, right?
On yourself as well.
Just on your timeline. Okay, but then let's hypothetically go, all right, so there is something that you've decided, yes, I can do. It's just at that border of where I think my extreme, you know, like the deadline is just achievable, but it's kind of makes you a bit nervous. What's your kind of go-to process or practice routine when you say, okay, I have 3 days to get this concerto up. I think I can do it, but I have no time to waste. How do you approach that type of situation?
Or maybe like at least I have like 2 months, not 3 days.
Yeah, okay, for you it might be 3 days. For us mere mortals, that might equate to like 2 months, right?
Yeah.
But what?
No.
Or 1 year. So how do I size it up?
Well, you sort of have to. It's important to have some sort of process or method, or kind of like to be organized. I think in your, I tend to be a pretty organized person. Like not necessarily in, I don't make my bed or something like that. I'm not that organized in like, in everything. But it's more like
you don't make your bed.
I shouldn't have said that. You cut that out.
Exposed.
No, I mean, I'm not like super organized about everything, but you have to be fairly organized in the practice work to like handle a large volume of stuff, because you sort of like, especially if you have to do work on different things parallel to one another, and I think that's that's an important aspect of it. So if I have now to prepare something in a couple of days, then I mean the different sides of it are how the fingers feel, like that it has to that the muscle memory has to be second nature. You have to just like put in enough time practicing the thing and just repetition, and so that feels good. Then there's also like a mental preparation and memorization that I have sort of a method to like since if I don't have much time to rememorize something, how do I make sure that I don't have a memory slip? It tends to be that I go through the piece mentally without my left hand moving. So what I do is that I sit down at the piano and play the violin part with the right hand at the pianos, because I can't access the left hand muscle memory that way. Like it's the other side of the brain or something. I don't know how it works, but somehow if I play the piece like that, I will get stuck in all the places where I might have a memory slip, basically.
Yeah.
And it's what happens even with pieces you know very well is that, of course you know how the themes go, but then as soon as there's passage work that's faster, you're just relying on your fingers knowing where to go. And maybe you don't actually know what the notes are, like fast passages. And that's sort of how I test that and check and like, okay, what are these patterns? What are these notes? Something like Prokofiev versus Sokovich, where sometimes things seem a little bit random or confusing, or kind of very not predictable, right? And that becomes even more important.
Yeah.
And so that's another side, and then kind of and then there's on the musical side, trying to remind myself of what the piece is about, what's the character, what am I trying to say with it, and that's sometimes maybe it can be the thing that takes the longest. If I bring back a piece, but I feel like it's not quite there yet, it doesn't feel like it has the right character yet. It doesn't have the right sound yet. Like that's so that ends up maybe then being the thing that I spent the most time on, maybe, but. I don't know. When it's a brand new piece that I don't know, then some of this stuff I have to discover, so it takes longer to sort of figure out what I want the piece to be. I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to say that's quite fascinating. I've never heard of that approach of playing on the piano to help you memorize. But it makes sense, right? You're basically saying rather than just having muscle memory as one channel, you also want to test your actual ability to know the music. I guess an extreme version of that would be like, can you dictate out the entire score on notation?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That might be a bit too time consuming.
That's a hardcore method of. I know. Yeah, sometimes people do that as an exercise. You write down the piece, but that takes forever. That's the thing.
So long.
Like you can't do that all the time. Whereas the thing with the right hand on the piano, it doesn't take longer than the piece really. Like you can just kind of view it that way. Then you've got like it's like a backup to the muscle memory. And the thing is, once I know that I've done that, then I know I'm not likely to get lost. Then I'm also not afraid of the memory slip. And if you're not afraid of the memory slip, you're less likely to have the memory slip, because like the memory slip happens when you think you might, it's all psychological, right? It's such a complicated thing, but it's been really, that has worked. I learned about it from a pianist who would like, she was really scared of memory slips. And so she would practice the right hand with the left hand and the left hand with the right hand. She would like reverse it in order to kind of test her memory, and that's much harder than what I'm suggesting.
That's crazy.
That's very
Can you
hard.
imagine? I'll just YOLO it.
I feel like I would be so paranoid that my muscle memory will still
Be
kick in and
confused.
play the wrong thing, right?
Be confused.
It's like practicing with the wrong fingering on purpose.
Oh
then
my
what if
God,
on the
that's
actual
crazy.
concert day? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty crazy.
It's an extreme method.
Okay, so so you have the kind of muscle memory side to make sure that that's all there. Then you have the kind of mental memorization, and then lastly you focus on kind of the character to know what you want to say with the music. I think it's really interesting. But I guess I want to first ask, in the kind of muscle side, are there any methods you go about getting there as quick as possible, or is it kind of more just like you're all set and you just do a bit of metronome practice and you're there? Like, what does that look like for you?
Well, I think it's gonna be different for every person a little bit. So like for me, a lot of it has evolved to a practice method that's all about kind of like doing a lot in a very little time. So like I try to avoid wasting time with things in my practice that's let me say it this way. When I was younger, I would often just kind of play passages over and over again and then wait for them to get better. And maybe eventually they do, because somehow your subconscious part of your brain like fixes things for you, and then eventually that does sound better. But it takes a long time, and some things you can't really improve that way because you haven't really understood like sort of what is the problem, what are the actual problem solving part of the practicing wasn't there enough. So when I practice now, I play a passage, but I avoid repeating until I've improved something. Like if something isn't working, I think it's important to avoid repetitions. It's better to first figure out why it's not working. Why is it out of tune? Is there better fingering that I need to use, or what am I doing? And then once I've fixed it, then do a bunch of repetitions and then put it in context and then move on to the next thing. So it tends to be like that side of things tends to be fairly quick because I've sort of figured out over time, like what works for me.
So what does that feel like? Like, because I know exactly what you're talking about, like repetition. And I still do that today.
Yeah.
Like I make a mistake and I'm like, yeah, just keep doing it. Try a few more times. Maybe I'll hit it one out 100 times. But like, because I imagine people listening, they'll just be like, well, I mean, I know in theory I had to like not practice my mistakes, but what does it feel like in the brain? Like, let's say I play a passage and clearly there's something wrong. Maybe, I don't know. Is it because I need to be aware of my mistakes first? And then once I identify my mistakes, how do I then go to be done? How do I be disciplined enough to go, you know what? Let's try and figure out what's going on. Okay, is it this note? Is it the string crossing? Is it the phrasing? What is it? What does it look like for you? Like, how do you do that?
I mean, maybe it's like, maybe I have this sort of mind anyway that like likes to sort of, as I was asking why, why is this happening? Why is it not working? Like, what's going on? Like sometimes, there are some teachers who teach in a sort of like this sort of mystical way, and they give you something inspiring to think about, and then suddenly it sounds
Feel
better.
the rain.
That always frustrated me.
Feel it.
Yeah, exactly.
You've had a few lessons. Like we've all had a few lessons.
Yeah.
It's like just imagine
Beethoven's suffering
Yeah.
in your soul.
you're like, dude, my suffering is I can't play in tune.
So I found that kind of frustrating because I was like, no, okay, it sounds better, but why?
Yeah.
Like I need to know,
100%.
like what was different? What did I do differently? And so that's kind of already the mindset. Yeah. So when I'm playing something, I tend to be like really. I think it's very important to listen to yourself very closely, even if that's frustrating. Like, okay, you hear a lot of stuff maybe that you don't like, or that you want to be better, and then that's that frustration. You can channel it positively by using that to then work and like ask, okay, why is it not working? And okay, I'm missing this shift. Why am I missing this shift? Okay, maybe it's a bad fingering. Maybe I haven't practiced the shift enough times. That can also happen. Or like maybe the motion isn't smooth enough. Or there's often like that can be multiple reasons. So like you have to sort of figure out, try different things. There's not always like an answer that pops into your head. Like it's not always like this is it. It's like, could this be it? Could that be it? You have to sort of like, you have to be searching until but if you do that for a while, you find, now it sounds a bit better.
Yeah.
Okay, and then now you've made progress. Now you repeat it a couple of times to like save that progress, so to speak. And if you do that over and over, day after day, year after year, you sort of like accumulate the level of your technique sort of like accumulates and grows, because you've solved so many tiny little problems that eventually the whole starts to emerge as being something pretty good. But still, there's, even after all these years, you still have to keep at it with the problem solving, I guess.
I love that you mentioned like practice. A lot of practice is problem solving, because people don't really say that, right? But like there's a very kind of mental, it's almost like a game, like a challenge that you're trying to figure out. To me, the kind of imagery I'm almost seeing when you describe this is like a precision, like doctor trying to make the correct diagnosis of a situation before giving the right treatment, right? It's like, okay, you don't just, a patient comes in and you just keep treating with whatever until hoping they get better. You actually okay, well, I think might do blood tests or do some scans or whatever until you figure out exactly what is causing the root cause of the issue. I mean, that's kind of the feeling I'm getting. But then my question is like, I feel like then for me sometimes, it almost sounds like the speed in which you can correctly solve problems then becomes almost a determining factor in how quickly your practice can improve you, right? Because sometimes I might know that I sound crap, but I'm just trying to figure out, like, is it my arm angle? Is it my bow contact? Is it my first joint knuckle? Is it my neck? And then I kind of like just, I know the problem's there, but then I'm trying to come up with all these hypotheses of what could be the issue, but that sometimes it takes a long time. And I guess there's something to be said, like maybe in cases like that, you seek guidance, you look for a teacher that could help you, or like a friend. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts on that.
Sometimes I'm just like, am I dumb?
Am I just not it?
Okay.
It's not meant to be.
I think it's normal. I think it's normal to hit a wall sometimes, like that, and you're like, and as I said, the solutions don't just pop into your head. You're like, could it be this? Could it be that? Just like as you say, like that you're searching maybe for a while, like you're trying to figure out why it's not working, and I think that's okay. You have to be patient with that and keep going, because like eventually you might finally think of the thing. Maybe it ends up being something really obvious. You're like, oh my God, like why didn't I think of that? Or like, but teachers can of course help with this, because with their experience, they might have seen the issue before. So maybe the right teacher looks at you and is like, yeah, I know exactly what this is. You're doing this with your bow arm and it's affecting your sound, or you're pressing too hard with your finger, whatever it is. I don't know. Then they might diagnose it very fast, and it's like a shortcut to get there. Like that suddenly you have the solution. But it can also often happen that the teacher is also not sure. Like then they're like, they can sort of help you with they can help suggest, or maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and they can give you things to practice on. And but when you're teaching, you don't always know exactly what the student should do. You can suggest things, and with the more experience you have, the more things you think of that might help, and some things that always help. Like like practice. If you always get stuck in a passage, if you practice it slowly, that's something that tends to generally help in most cases. Like it's never a bad idea, or like just that kind of slowing things down, looking at the shapes you're making. But I find often that the question of why is this happening, that many young players just kind of like don't ask that. And they're kind of like waiting for it to get better, and then maybe wait for the teacher to say something. But you're ultimately, everything you're going to improve, you have to improve yourself on the violin. Like nobody's gonna play it for you, right? So it is up to you. So this question is kind of the most essential, and the more years you spend practicing and asking these questions, you do see the same problems pop up over and over. So eventually you actually know a lot of the answers. It's like, okay, that was out of tune, and I know exactly why. It's because that finger is flat, because, I mean, one of the things that happens, for example, is that the hand pretty much always wants to be like in this kind of relaxed shape. So whenever you're trying to whenever you have to stretch things in a way that's different with your whole steps and half steps, the fingers tend to be out of tune in the direction of sort of even space. That's it's often a thing that, especially when you're shifting into a position, that the fingers are just gonna be sharp or flat based on where the hand naturally actually kind of wants to be. And sort of getting your hand used to the shape you have to make in each position, and sort of being clear, okay, here you have to stretch like this, and then you have to stretch like this, and that is part of kind of this diagnostic that sometimes explains. So when I'm practicing and something's out of tune, I often know right away what it is. It's like, oh yeah, well, that note always wants to be sharp, so gotta remember now. It's this.
Okay, so it's almost like
something.
I imagine over years of experience, you can have a mental checklist of the possible causes of different problems, right? So let's say it's an intonation problem. There's a tone problems. There might be legatos, connection, tone, different types of problems. And with each one, you go, okay, so let's say intonation. One of the possible problems is the tendency for fingers to want to revert to even spacing. And so you just kind of build this arsenal of testing tools maybe in your mind. Would you say?
Yeah. I think you sort of there are the sort of the things the questions you ask first, because they pop up so often, right? That you're just like, okay, so is it this? Kind of. I mean, maybe you don't even need to ask the question. You just recognize. You just know exactly what you screwed up eventually, because it's such a familiar issue already. But then if something new happens, it's like, oh, I'm not sure why this isn't sounding well, or why am I having trouble with this? Sometimes physically, when you get older, it's also like you have to sometimes relearn different aspects of your technique, and that's something where then you end up encountering new questions. I mean, one thing that I started doing when I was around 30 or in my late 20s is that I stopped moving my fingers quite so much. I think it's because when I was growing up, I played a lot of piano, and on the piano, every note you play, you move your finger, right? But on the violin, it's not supposed to work that way. I mean, the lower notes you can often keep pressed, like your first, second, and second finger. Sometimes they can stay for a while, or it can be on multiple strings at once, I wasn't really playing like that. So the first finger particularly always came up constantly, and it was putting a lot of strain on my hand. And then I started to try to be a little bit more efficient and basically move those fingers less, sometimes leave them pressed for a while. And that was something it took quite a while to build this habit, because it's so ingrained. These things, it's like subconscious. It's second nature that the fingers always move away from the string once you're done with the note. But when it finally when this new habit finally became ingrained, I found it's more consistent.
We should try that too.
So it's easier to play in tune sometimes, because you put the finger down once, and then when you come back to it,
yeah.
So
I had that bad habit. I always 1, 2. I already lifted it up. Do you see that? I just unconscious. I just wanted to lift it up. It's so annoying. And I know you have to try and be efficient, right? So maybe that's something you can try and practice. Actually, it was funny. I was just thinking just that. It's like Augustin has a whole MRI scanner and all these diagnostic tools, and I just have a mirror. That's what it feels like. Because there's Augustin has spent so much time building these mental tools to assess any situation.
Well, yeah. Well, I want to. Sorry, yeah. I want to know so when you do have a new
We're getting
situation,
so nerdy about this. That's awesome.
but I'm so curious, like,
I want to know.
because I feel actually can I ask, do you know your MBTI, your personality?
MBTI, what's that?
The 16 personalities.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Do you know it?
Oh no, do I want to know? Oh no, it's probably super over perfectionist nerd. I don't know. I don't know.
No, it's
You should do it. You should. I'll send it to you.
I think you should do it. I already have my predictions.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I was going to send it to you right now.
I feel like
Okay.
Augustin might be an INTJ. Maybe INFJ. I think INTJ. But it's basically a system of personality where there's like 4 kind of different components that make up someone's personality. And so the first component is like whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you gain energy by being with others or not. The second one is whether you're kind of a more sensing. This is really interesting. I think you might find. So the second pillar is to do with how one's mind takes in information from the world. And so some people lean more towards the side of sensing. So they're very much in their senses. And so they perceive the world very, like, it's almost very through the 5 senses, right? Whereas intuitive people, of course, we still have our perceptions, but we kind of perceive more through kind of intuition and abstraction. And then we kind of live more in the world of like theories and mental models. And then the third one's about, with the information you get, how do you then make judgments? So some people arrive to judgments very much based off how they feel about the information they received, and others tend to make judgments more based on kind of logically what they think is factual or whatever, right? And then the last one is P and J, which is basically J's like to make judgments earlier on based off the information they get, and they stick to it until something breaks that. Whereas P's tend to want to delay having to make that judgment until the last possible moment. So that typically manifests itself in people. J's like to plan and are organized, whereas P's are very spontaneous and fluid type of thing.
You should do it. It's a really interesting test.
Yes.
Yeah, and then so that makes 16 personality combinations.
Yeah, I can see. I'm definitely more the person who tends to be more organized and then tries to decide. And I don't think I'm an introvert. Like, I've always really loved being around people, and I sort of like get energy from for talking with people. Then it's sort of like my mood picks up. I sort of feel energized. So I'm not necessarily someone who like has to be around people constantly, you know, like some people feel lonely as soon as they're not talking to someone. Like, I'm perfectly fine being on my own, but I feel like my mood picks up when I'm around people. I think it's one thing that I enjoy about chamber music, or when I travel around, when I'm playing with others, that it feels so social. I have a slightly, like, when I'm traveling all by myself and then I also am playing solo recitals, then sometimes that feels a little lonely somehow. You know, that's like it's. I mean, it's great repertoire and it's very rewarding and so forth. But like after a few days, I'm like, oh, I miss other people. I mean, I meet people all the time, but you know what I mean. Like, to sort of you feel like you have a deeper connection when you play music with people. Then it's a more intense.
I'm so curious. I don't know what. You should do it and let us know.
Maybe I should take this test.
And let us know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's just the way you kind of think about analyzing. But I did want to ask. I'm so curious. So, when you do encounter a new question, like, how do you say, okay, I've never seen this. I'm looking at X-ray scan. I have no idea what I'm looking at. Like, what do you do? Do you kind of just start tinkering, experimenting? Do you look for answers elsewhere? You know, how does that kind of work?
Yes. Okay. So I had this experience where I was learning the violin concerto by Thomas Adès, which is unbelievably difficult. He wrote it in 2005, And it had been played by other people, but I think that was an example where everyone found sort of their own weird solutions because the difficulty was so extreme. And what I found so crazy was at one point I had to play incredibly high, really with all 4 fingers, but it's so high up that I had to take my thumb off, basically.
Interesting.
I can no longer have that as an orientation. And because I don't have a very long pinky.
Me too.
It's a
It's a hassle. It's a freaking big problem.
So,
you see, I'm not the only one. It's a big problem.
It's like I was jealous when people's pinkies are as long as their third finger. It's unfair. But so the problem is once I'm up there, I can reach no problem with the second and third finger, but not with the fourth finger. So I had to take the thumb off, and it felt so scary. It felt like sort of free climbing. Not that I've ever done that, so I don't know what that feels like. But I imagine free climbing a mountain without any ropes, like that sort of like you have a feeling that you could slip off, you could fall off. That was kind of terrifying. And then, but in the end, though, I found once I performed that, so the first time I performed it, I was really scared about that passage. But then in the end, I figured out it's not really that much harder than a lot of other stuff you do on the violin. It's just like, I never had to do that before. And I know some violinists with really small hands who actually have to take the thumb off quite frequently, and they play without any problem. So it's kind of like when you encounter a problem that you just haven't seen before, and it can feel like totally insurmountable. But then in the end, maybe it actually isn't even that difficult. It was just something that's totally different from the challenges you had before, it's not, maybe it won't be useful in any other piece because in every other piece that I play, there's probably some other fingering that gets around that way I can leave the thumb still. So it's only for this piece that I learned how to.
Makes sense.
I definitely have that issue, especially this shorter pinky. Like, I know exactly what you mean. As you go up, the second, third finger are fine. So I'll always replace my fourth finger with a third finger. Like, it's just easier. And then sometimes, unless I'm forced, I don't like it. I'm forced. I'm like, I have to come all the way around.
Yeah.
It's not a good feeling.
It's like
and so some people have like this sort of like pinky extension. It feels like they can just like whoop. And so there are sometimes fingerings in the parts when you buy music by some. I feel like Francescatti fingerings are always like this in the international edition. That he puts a lot on the fourth finger.
Yeah.
And he must have had a long fourth finger because all those fingerings are super uncomfortable to me. I don't think they don't work for everyone.
Makes sense. So true.
Anyway.
I feel like that could be a whole nother podcast next time, just talking about fingering decisions.
Oh, we should do that next time.
That'll
be crazy. There'll be like super like deep fingering positions. There was so much to talk about. Okay, we should take a 180 turn. Off the camera, you were saying that you love, because you fly a lot, right? You tour a lot. You travel so much, and we travel a lot, but nowhere near as much as you. So when we fly, we get points, flight points. What is that like? Because Eddie and myself, we definitely need tips. Because I feel like we're using our points in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
So yes, well, I think because I sort of like strategy games, and I sort of like approached it that way. That I think if you think of it like it's a very complicated strategy game that's totally rigged against you. Like the rules are made in such a way that you're not meant to get good value for your miles, for your airline miles. But if you are really clever about it and plan ahead and are really like methodical about it, you can get pretty good miles. But it's so it became a bit of a hobby just because I was flying so much and I was accumulating miles. I had trouble using them well, and then I got like really into this points game, as they call it. And sometimes I remember one time I had a trip to Hong Kong, so I was like I set an alarm clock for precisely 331 days before my flight day. When it was midnight Hong Kong time, because I knew that then the award seats on Cathay Pacific would come online and I could book it like right there.
Whoa! What?
But other people were. The thing is, like they released 2 seats at that time. Everything has changed since then. But like the airline was releasing 2 seats right at midnight always, and there's probably someone else who's doing the same thing, who's also trying to click and get this award seat.
That's
and
crazy.
my problem is I had very specific days that I needed to fly. Like I'm going to fly there because of when the concert is. So it's like I need to get it for this.
Did you get it?
And yes, I sometimes I had some success stories, but also you have some stuff that don't work out. Some dreams are dashed. You know, in the points game, it's you win
so
some.
how do you
lose
get
some.
started? Like for
That's
someone
how
like
it
us,
is.
like I see points there, but then I'm like, we did a whole world tour.
And
I can't even get
is one upgrade.
Yeah, one up or like sometimes not even one because the flight's too long. Or like
Yeah.
if it's a short flight, then we get one upgrade, then it's all gone. Points are gone.
Okay, I guess it depends a little bit on what airline you are crediting the points to, because some airlines have programs that are much more rewarding than
okay.
others.
Okay.
And then there are some websites where they sort of like discuss the pros and cons and try to put valuations on those points. They're like, well, these points we think are worth $2 per mile, or maybe these points are only worth 1 cent per mile or something. And that can be a way to at least assign a value to them. But that's not very exact, because sometimes when you, some of them, some awards might be overpriced, or there are some good deals you can get as well. And so it depends a little bit on where you actually want to fly later, like with your points. And so there's a lot to consider, but I think it sort of probably starts with researching the different programs and which one is actually the most rewarding one. Because it sounds like the one that you credited your points to just isn't giving you enough for your trouble, for your miles. And so some are more rewarding than others, or have
there like
certain upgrade rules that are better.
You know how like in games there's a term like the current meta? You know the term? Yeah. Is there a current meta for points? Like this is the optimal airline
Well, it's funny. That's a really funny way of putting it. Yeah, there were times when some airline miles were giving sort of a ridiculous amount of value, but then the airline realizes it, and then they sort of like raise their prices.
They nerfed it.
And so then they nerf it. Yeah. So there were times when American Airlines miles, like they were really, some of the first class awards were like really cheap for some reason, but then eventually they raised their prices, or that has happened. And in general, there's sort of some inflation going on, because they're handing out. Everyone's constantly earning miles, so the amount of miles in total is probably increasing. Plus, people are getting miles for their credit cards and for all kinds of things, and so at regular intervals, the value of the miles is actually decreasing. So I think one rule is you shouldn't sit on your miles for too long. You should try to use them before too long, because it's just like having cash in your bank, like it eventually like
the value
is worth less, right?
Dude, it's like it's all rigged against you.
Someone needs to begin miles investment, like freaking
calculator,
fund or something. If I don't use my miles now, I put it into this fund. It gives a 5% mile return per annum.
Oh, I wish that. No, it's not. It really is. I mean, they wouldn't be running these programs if it wasn't good for the airline, right? It's good for the airline because it makes a lot of people then buy more expensive tickets on that airline, so they earn those miles. But ultimately, the airline doesn't give you that much for it, so they're not losing that much from it. So but because I'm kind of like I've always been sort of a strategy game person, like a board game. Into board games, into like strategy video games like StarCraft. And so then I sort of like was like, oh, I bet I can figure out the rule. And there's a whole community online of people who try to figure out ways how to get more value, and some things they keep secret, because like if you talk about it,
it's done.
then the airlines will change their rules, so there's a whole it's like a whole subculture.
That's so funny.
Imagine
But
everyone's online forums and using it as like points hacker 101.
You say you play board games. What board games do you play? Because we play a little bit sometimes too.
Yeah.
We have board game nights.
I used to have a lot really regular board game nights. Nowadays I don't get to do them as much, but the board games that I like most are, I guess, the kind of like more in-depth, longer strategy games. Like Agricola, Caverna, these kinds of games. There was one called Tolkien, which was, I thought, really awesome, like very complicated. I've played Settlers of Catan also. It's a classic, but there are a lot of, I think the board games that I like are the ones that are not too much luck-based. Like if everything is determined by a die roll, then I'm less interested somehow. But I want to feel like, I struggled and overcame, my opponent with strategy, and it's like, I guess really, I wouldn't say I'm always that good at. Some games I'm good at, but most of them, I don't know. StarCraft, for example, I'm actually not very good at StarCraft, but I still just love the game. So it's sometimes, even if I'm losing, I can still have a very good time if I feel like I'm learning something. I'm figuring out my strategy for the next game, and that can be, and there's also like it can be fun to see people play strategy games really well. Lately I've been getting really into watching chess games, and when you watch incredible chess players and how just amazing their moves are, and so that's
Magnus Carlsen
can be even like Magnus Carlsen, of course, is like the greatest, but so then I even though I could never play like that, but it's sort of like it's really fun to see that somehow, like to see someone play so well is somehow really thrilling.
Honestly, it's so inspiring, right? To see someone do how is that even possible?
Yeah.
Kind of like us when we watch you play violin.
Yeah. Like so many recordings online. I'm like,
how's that possible?
And it's not just that. It's like you listen to it, oh, that's pretty good. And you listen to it again, you're like, hang on a second. Whoa. Like you switch it on a bit and you say, whoa, how's that even possible?
Yeah. But I know what you mean though. Like the games, games that just, for me, actually, would you consider Catan more strategy or more luck? Settlers of Catan.
I think Catan it does have a luck
I think so.
element,
and it frustrates me.
It's pretty strong, because even like sort of how you start the game off, like there's a lot out of your control. There are other games that are much more, there should always be a randomness factor so that the game is not the same every time. You don't want it to be repetitive. So something like Caverna is good in the sense that there are certain cards that will be shuffled differently. So like the options you have of these tiles to take are different in each game. But still, when you start off, everyone has probably an even chance to win. And in the best games, even if you're way behind, you should still have some hope. Like I don't like games where I think it's a sign of a bad game when you're just completely screwed because you made a mistake on the second.
Those games are so lame.
You did the wrong thing. That's it. Can't win. Forget it. And now you have to suffer through 3 hours of losing. Right? Like that's a sign of a bad board game.
Yeah. You're just sitting there. You're just like, okay, I've lost.
It's like Monopoly. Much, Once one person owns like half the land, it's just a slow drip until that one person.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, exactly. That's actually not. I wouldn't say that's. It's a famous board game and it's fun, but I wouldn't say it's a great board game for that reason, because it's not. It doesn't have this kind of exciting comeback potential. Like it should be that you're struggling and you're behind, but if you think of just the right thing and do the right, you have a chance to catch up, and maybe you'll get. It can sometimes maybe you know you're not gonna win, but maybe you can get second place. You know, out of
makes sense.
the 4 players, or maybe or like how many points can I still get? Like maybe I can still, or maybe you're really mad at one player and so like, okay, I can't win now, but at least I can screw them up. But
I hate those players. I was like,
I've
come
been
on,
told-
bro. You're not even doing this to win. You're just trying to screw me over.
That's really funny. Yeah.
Dude, we should play some board games
No.
next time.
I've been
But in the same city.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That'll be fun.
I'll be so fun.
we should.
I want to try all those other board games that you're saying.
Yeah.
It'll be so cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I
Cool.
mean, I'm keeping an eye on time. I think we've got to wrap things up. But what should we say? Was there anything else we want to share with the audience listening in today?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it was super fun. Thank you so much for taking time to chat with us. Is there anything like a passing, ending thought that you want to share with everyone watching today's podcast episode?
Oh shit.
Disclaimer, we did not give
guys.
him any kind of...
Okay, so think of something really wise and inspiring.
wise and
Oh, shit,
inspiring.
okay. I don't know. I mean, I think that having a sort of playful approach to many aspects of life, I think it's really healthy. So I think one of the reasons why I like playing, why I play games in my free time, why I like strategy games, it's not only because it's a challenge, or it's not only because, it's good for my brain. It's not really that. It's more that I find this sort of playful approach is kind of a healthy approach. Also when I'm, and I think it does actually apply to violin playing, or it applies to many other aspects in life where you have to be sort of, where you have to make strategic decisions, or where you that you can't you can't be I don't know what I'm trying to say. You can't be too hard on yourself, like for each decision there has to be sort of like maybe a playful approach. I don't know if that's so good. You can cut that out and splice in something more interesting.
It's funny. That's funny enough. We just leave it in. It's like, yeah, you know what? That's probably not the best.
Don't worry, this is a playful podcast.
Nothing serious here. But I think, okay, but like, I feel like if anyone's, if you're, wherever you guys are tuning in and Augustine's coming to your city, definitely go check out the concerts, right? And do you have like an album coming up or anything? Like record concerts?
Yes, right. I'm supposed to plug my album.
Yes. You're supposed to plug it. That's the whole point of this podcast.
I'm supposed to. Yeah. Okay. So, so I do have an album coming out at the end of August.
Nice.
And it's called American Road Trip.
Ooh.
And it's been 20 years that I came to America, and I've been living here for 20 years. And so I decided to finally record an American album with Orion Weiss on the piano. And it's a lot of wonderful pieces with many, many different styles. I think that the amazing thing about American music is that there isn't like one style of American music. There's like all kinds of totally different composers, from like avant-garde composers to romantics and minimalists, and composers who write jazzy or music, or there's one piece that's inspired by Jimi Hendrix, or there's like all sorts of, it's such a melting pot, right? And that's kind of what I was trying to make this album, is that it feels like, sort of going on a road trip through America and seeing sort of all the different styles of music. And I had a great time, especially with some of the country music and or jazzy music. I think that that was really fun for me. I think especially lately I've been getting really into country and bluegrass playing, because I feel like it's actually it's a style of music that's really asking to be played by classical players, because it suits the instrument so well. It's actually easy to get into too, and there's so much good music out there. So anyway, that's the new album. It's coming. It's
Wow.
coming soon.
Oh,
Exciting.
can't wait. Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
wait. I want to hear it.
Okay.
Get
Yeah.
my hands on one.
Yeah. Cool.
All
Awesome.
right, man.
Well-
Thanks so much for being on this podcast, and I hope we can meet again sometime soon. I don't know when's the next time.
We'll
but-
do our round 2 over board games.
Yeah, round 2 of board
The,
games. That'll
the
be
round
so
2
cool.
podcast will just be a
Yes.
live stream of us screwing you over on Catan. Just kidding.
Well, there are some board games you can play online, and it's pretty nice because you don't have to how there's a lot of
Yeah.
preparation for board games and a lot of cleanup
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
end. So when you play the online versions, you don't have any of that. So you can
That's
actually
true.
play way more matches in less
True,
time.
Yeah.
And so, for example, Seven Wonders is,
Oh, we
is an
played that.
awesome
We
game
played
to
that,
play
we played
online
that.
that I
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
takes. Yeah, we should.
should
Oh,
listen
it's
back.
online
Okay, let's do
too.
it.
I always
Yeah.
go for the university
Yeah.
route. The academic points.
Ah,
yeah.
yes, you would.
Yeah, exposed.
Exposed.
Oh, and do your MBTI test and send it
Yeah,
to us.
I'll
on
send you a
us.
proper link. Yeah, that'll
Yeah.
be so cool.
Okay, I will. Okay, all right.
Cool, awesome.
Yes.
Thanks everyone who's watching.
Okay, well, it's great to
Yes.
see you guys.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for watching.
Yes.
See you guys next
All
time.
right.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.